Hi, Nidhu.
Hi.
And Shilpa.
Hi, Shilpa.
Hi, Shilpa. Why are we not seeing you? Oh my God. Gosh, the moment that I
Mess up my pronunciations. You guys come on video, yeah, Shilpa?
Hi, just 1 minute, please.
I thought I can come in only as a woman, no? So
Yes.
wait.
It takes a little more than a dupatta, though.
Hey, your mom's here.
Oh,
Mama
gosh.
boss.
I'm Mama.
Hi. So nice. I'm so impressed with everybody who comes in like 10 minutes before. Like it says so much about who you are. Like I come in 5 minutes after. You know?
Hi, Shilpa.
Hi.
Shilpa,
So good to see
so
you.
lovely.
Yeah, so
Thank
lovely.
you.
Your hair's grown
Thank you.
so far.
Yes, you can't really see, but it's
Yeah.
long.
Wow. Wow. And you and I are wearing photos.
Excuse me.
And Neelu
Oh,
is
how this gets missed? You please tell me. How this gets missed?
Wait, I will get mine as well.
Get.
I did think about it, then I said, no, I don't want to look like so Bengali also.
So will
I
I.
look very Bengali when I wear a bindi.
Yeah. Amrish, you also
So will
get
I.
yours.
So will
You
I.
also get yours.
Yeah.
This.
Chalo, chalo, bindi pehna.
Checking.
And next time we have to wear 3.
Ruchira's call, I almost stuck 2 tiny silver ones over here. Then I said, no, then Shilpa will say we're actually going dancing.
And everybody who's joined us, what we were really doing, like the entire team has come on right now because we all wanted to get together and say a big, huge, gigantic, humongous, galactic thank you to all of y'all. And we wanted to do it with Bindi, so Amush still has to get his, but Ruchira has gotten hers. Ruchira, show.
There.
There you are.
See how Bengali I start looking.
is is Misbah coming in? Is she not being able to connect? Because
Amrish,
I wanted to grab a quick photo. I got you with the dupe on your head, huh, by the way.
Shilpa, have you seen our honorary woman in the team?
but Amrish, you look like it is Diwali time at our house because at that time even the men have to cover
Up the head.
their head. So is Misbah coming on?
Supposed to.
And has Swamini ji logged on?
Not yet.
Yeah. By the way, it is correct to say Swamini, it is correct to say Swamini ji. But normally when we address our teacher as Swami, invariably we end up saying Swami.
G
Yeah, the G
G आ ही जाता है.
आ जाता है.
Swamini ji
Now
is
that is
actually
very pretty.
Who's looking very pretty?
Vandy says Amrish is looking very pretty.
आपने बिंदी लगाया? Have you put your bindi on? Oh.
and Swamini ji is also here.
Swamini ji.
Hi, Swamini ji.
Hi, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. How are
She
you?
also has a bindi on.
We didn't realize that it was going to be such synchronicity, but actually, she always comes on with a bindi.
With a bindi.
I haven't prepared anybody for how young she is, but as you can see, she's probably one of the youngest Vedanta teachers we have in the country, maybe even the world. Would this be correct, Swamini ji?
Perhaps. I don't know. I haven't
Okay.
yet. Yeah.
And Neelu,
Yes. We're actually,
We're a
yes.
little ahead of time, so we
Yes,
can do
we're
that.
still waiting. Yeah, we're waiting for a few more people to join in. And while that happens, we actually just, the entire team's here. And we wanted to take this opportunity to say a quick, big thank you to everybody who's here, the team, everyone. But this is something that Nidhu has to do. Nidhu, please.
I just want to say, each and every one of y'all have been our kind of audience. Y'all have been so intelligent, y'all have been curious, y'all have been inquisitive, y'all have asked the most amazing questions, and I know that a lot of y'all have taken back from each and every speaker, but what we wanted to do today was tell you how much we have gotten because of your presence. Your presence has made this Tele Summit one of our best ever Tele Summits. It's been a joy, it's been a pleasure, it's been an honor to be amongst women. We have more than 2,000 women who've signed up to be part of this. And to each and every one of y'all, the Mystic Lotus and Dragonflies wishes to say a big, big thank you. We send you lots of love. We send you a big, big group hug on behalf of Shilpa, Ruchira, Amrish, and Neelu, and myself. And suddenly I felt like an air hostess saying we're going to land, but we're not going to land. Our last call takes place between Neelu and Swamini Ji, who you're going to hear about and hear from very shortly. I just want to say that we would love for you to join us again. We are back in a month's time on the Mystic Lotus and Dragonflies awesome Money Tele Summit. And you are now family. And everywhere we go, we want our family to be there. So come, we will see you then. For today, I'm going to sign out and let Neelu take over. Big thank you again, my darlings, and see you on the other side.
Nidhu, you forgot to give them their gift. The Money Tele Summit is normally a paid for Tele Summit, even for listeners, but everybody who, please give. Nidhu.
Everybody who's picked up a package with us and will pick up a package with us, because I think y'all will all want to sign up with Swamini Ji once you've heard her speak, then your entry into the ticket price of 1,000 rupees is absolutely at no charge. So some of y'all are already part of it. The rest of y'all, don't think about it. Pick up something, come. Be with us. We're looking forward to it. Over to you, Neelu. Over to you, Swamini Ji.
Thank you, Nidhu. Thank you. And I also, Swamini Ji, we're just 1 minute past 7. And today I don't have to look at the chat for me to get the green signal. The entire team is up on the screen. So once you guys give me the thumbs up, we'll take it from there, from 10 seconds from there.
Let's do a countdown together.
Oh yeah, let's do that. Let's do that.
Neelu, here you go. 10.
Hang on.
Okay.
Sorry, I need to change the muting settings, the call settings.
Yeah, sure.
We really like your.
You give us the signal.
And while you're doing that, everybody, where it says Mystic Lotus 2, that's Shilpa. Shilpa has handled so much on the back end, you won't believe it. You know how there are people behind the stage who are like tightly holding on to the landscape so it doesn't fall on somebody's head? That's Shilpa. And Misbah, but Misbah is not here right now.
She's here now.
She's.
Okay, Shilpa, Misbah, just wave out to everybody, please. And you all know our very handsome, very reliable, incredibly a hard-working COO, that's Amrish, the only guy on the side did his very best by coming on with the chatter. But you know what? We accept him. We love him. It's okay. He didn't have to dress up like that. Amrish, have you waved to everybody?
Yes.
Yes. And you know Ruchira, our co-host. Ruchira is also a consultant with us. Some of our great promotions and brandings are done by her and by her team. So Ruchira, for all the hats that you wear, please take them off and wave to everybody. And Neelu, you know, and are going to know a little bit more because I think we are ready for the countdown. Is that correct, Amrish?
One moment, please. Yeah, we are ready. All of you will have to unmute yourself. Because you would have gone on mute with the settings. Nidhu, you're on mute. Ruchira, you're on mute. Shilpa, you are on mute. Swami Niji, you're unmuted now. Shilpa, you're still on mute. Right? Okay.
10, 9,
9,
8,
8,
7,
7,
6,
6,
5,
5,
4,
4,
3,
3,
2,
2,
1.
1.
Take off.
Let's go.
Good evening and welcome in to our last call in this very first edition of the Mystic Lotus and Dragonflies Awesome Women's Tele Summit. Today's call is indeed a very special one. We're blessed to have with us a Hindu monk and a former psychologist whose teachings of self-growth to self-discovery include courses, videos, workshops and retreats in India and abroad. She is Swamini Brahma Prajananda Saraswati, who has dedicated her life to the sharing and teachings of Advaita, Vedanta, and Dharma. Swamini Ji is a direct disciple of Pujya Swami Dayanand Saraswati, having studied Vedanta, Sanskrit, and Vedic chanting at Arsha Vidya Gurukulam. She studied part-time with Swami Brahma Vidananda Ji as well for about 12 years alongside work. She hosts a weekly podcast, Vedanta, the River of Wisdom, and has authored You Matter, Insights from Vedanta. And in case you're wondering, who is a Swamini or what does it take to become one? Well, Swami means master, generally referred to a master of wisdom. It takes a full-time commitment to Vedanta study and is a title given by the Guru. In other words, an authority on spiritual matters as they dedicate their life to the mastery of self and pursuit of truth and knowledge. It is said that the divine mysteries of the universe are revealed to the world through these eternal students and masters. And we're so blessed to have one such authority with us this evening. So without further ado, please put your hands together and join me in giving a warm Mystic Lotus welcome to Swamini Ji. Good evening and welcome in.
Thank you, Neelu. And congratulations, all of you, on these 5 years. I didn't know it was that long or that short. And congratulations to blooming, because as the lotuses have bloomed, they have shared their light and love with many across the world, and I believe you continue to do that. So I will also do some special prayers that we may see our own abundance and see life as an abundant celebration. So by initial prayer, I will invoke the grace of the Guru Parampara, which is what we do when we teach, because we are channels for the knowledge to flow through. I have nothing new or creative to add to what our ancient rishis or masters have taught. So we invoke the grace of the Guru Parampara, and I also will invoke the grace of Ganapati so that he may bless this entire venture of mystic lotus and dragonflies healing. Om Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Bhadram Karane Shruyamadevah Bhadram Pashevakshabhiryajatraha Sthirairangai Stushtabhagum Sastanubhihi Vyashevadevahitai Yadayuhu Swastira Indro Vruddhashravaha Swastira Purusha Vishvavedaha Swastirastarksho Arishtanevihi Swastiro Brahaspatir Dadhatu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The title of my topic for today is Purna, the search for completeness. Purna, the word, is a Sanskrit word, and it actually reflects our true nature. So when I say our true nature, I mean that which defines you, not that which describes you, which is your occupation or what you do or what your identity is. It is that without which you cannot but be, that which defines you. And that is complete. This is the vision of the Veda. Now, when I'm looking back at this lockdown, or even without the lockdown, what I find, and I'm going to go into a little bit of stereotypical thinking, is the difference in the way men and women approach tasks. So a woman may have 10 things on the list like the man does, and the woman perhaps has finished 9 out of 10. The man has finished 4 out of 10. The woman will say, I still have that one more thing to tick off my list today. And the man will actually not only pat himself on the back, but will say, look at me, I managed to tick 4 off the list. Wow. And then the woman, again, I'm giving into the temptation of stereotypes, which I rarely do. The woman will think, what are you going on about? You still have so much to do. And the man will say, come on, 4 is a big number. And I managed to do all of it. Wow. So this is something that we have to learn from men, okay? Which is that we are very hard on ourselves. This is a universal experience, having interacted and conducted retreats with women from different cultures and different countries. I can say this is very universal. The inner critic of most women is quite strong. And it surfaces as I have to do a lot, I am not good enough, and so on. So this is a good step. Why? Because of not feeling good enough, the woman aspires like the man does. But I also believe that women are a lot more predisposed to spirituality. And we don't have to look any further than recognizing that this is an all women's tele summit. And if you look at any spiritual movement or group across the world, we just happen to find more women. Okay. Now, is it that the men do not need spirituality or whatever is that modality? No. Women are more predisposed to feeling inadequate, which actually can be her greatest strength. Because when we look at Bhagavad Gita, okay, so a lot of the Indians are likely to be familiar with this particular text, which is a dialogue between Arjuna and Krishna. Krishna being the teacher and Arjuna being the student. And when Arjuna describes how he is stuck, all of us can relate to that. Because in the first chapter, he talks about how even if he gets the kingdom, even if they win the battle, dil mange more. He also says that if I win, what is the point of the victory if I cannot share it with my loved ones? And loved ones meaning it's likely I have to kill them. So what is the point of all of this? If we lose, again, what will they say? They will just say a great warrior lost. You win some, you lose some, it's okay. Whether I win the battle, I lose the battle, I am stuck because it is a situation that is not acceptable to me. I want to know what my dharma is, and I also want to know Shreyas. He says that Nishchitam Bruhi Tanme, please tell me definitely what this Shreyas is. Shreyas meaning the ultimate good. So as a woman, playing different roles, much like the man, and struggling to play the different roles, again like the man, but taking it out on herself, unlike the man. Okay? So I am not enough. I need to be adequate. I want to feel Purna. And so the search for every achiever, this journey of spirituality can be classified into 3 or 4 types of people. There are some who are very casual about it. They like to read something, they watch an occasional video, and they want to use some tips and techniques that will improve the quality of their life. So those are the casual explorers, so to speak. Then there is another group which will want to go a little deeper into it because they have understood that the human problem is a problem of limitation, of feeling limited and always struggling to overcome that limitation. Why do I want a companion? Because I want freedom from loneliness. I want a home because I want freedom from homelessness. I want money because I want freedom from financial dependence. I want pleasure because I want freedom from boredom. All the way when we analyze our different pursuits, we find that whatever we want is not really for the sake of that thing, but we want to really be free from the very process of seeking. Because I want to be happy at all times, in all places, in all situations. That's why nobody will complain if I wish them happy something. So whether it's a happy 5th birthday, nobody's going to say, you know what, I don't want this happiness stuff, okay? You can keep it with you. Nobody says, I've had enough of my quota of happiness for today. I don't want any more. No one across the world is going to say it. And if I were to say, oh, I'm offering my sincere condolences that it is your birthday today, you are 1 year older, you are 1 year closer to your grave. Suppose I say that, people will think I need a special institution. My God, this person is so pessimistic. But I don't want to do, and there are terms also. This person will be called a toxic person in the healing world. So better keep myself away from this person. Okay. So there is this other group in the world of spirituality. Most of us, we like to call ourselves spiritual but not religious. Correct? So it's a growing phenomenon and a growing group worldwide. So the first group is the casual, is exploring something. Then there is another group that seeks to make a commitment to knowing something or to doing something. Like it's not just for taking care of a particular problem, but I see the benefit of this. I see the limitation of the human problem. Maybe I am a seeker. And it is this seeker that goes about exploring different healing modalities. And I believe there are a lot of healers in this group or healers associated with Mystic Lotus. And all of the healing modalities, whether it is palmistry, numerology, astrology, Akashic records, Reiki, any type of healing, what we are seeking is that we may be aligned to the universal energy, or whatever is the paradigm of that healing modality. That is what is aimed for, right? Now, whatever be the healing modality, there is no cure and no healing for death. Correct? All of the healing modalities, they have to offer their namaskara. Sorry, for death we have no cure. Neither does modern science have a cure. That despite all one's achievements and all the work that one has done in building, connecting with relationships and all of that, despite all the effort at harmonizing my chakras and balancing and my energies, there is no cure for death. And Bhagavan Krishna reminds us, Tasmat apariharya. It is a situation that has no remedy. So, despite everything, as we would say when we carry the dead body, Ram Naam Satya hai. That's ultimately the truth. So now, it seems very desolate. It seems quite hopeless after all this. Some people will say, no, there is some hope in a next lifetime. But here is where I want to share the Vedic vision of you being Purna and how to discover that. Because when we examine any healing modality, or if we are healers ourselves, what we have done is got a glimpse of the intelligence, the total intelligence. So let's just say that you are into astrology. Depending on how the planets are positioned, which is a reflection of one's own karma, you get a glimpse of the kind of situations you are likely to face in your life. What is going to be the relation with your mother, your father, status of finances, status of partnership, romantic or financial, your health, and so on. And in an astrological reading, as a Jyotish, a traditional astrologer, you are using the principles of cause and effect. You're saying, oh, this right now, your Shani is in this position. You will benefit from this remedy, which might include chanting Hanuman Chalisa, etc., etc. So you, as an astrologer, you got a glimpse of the principles of cause and effect in this particular matter. And the beauty is that you can see as many horoscopes as possible, which often resemble horror scopes. Still, the laws are consistent. It's not like Shani has dramatically changed, or the influence of Jupiter has changed dramatically. Nothing. The laws and principles that govern your particular branch or healing modality, they are predictable, they are consistent, they are reliable, they are certain, and they give us security. So then the question that begs to be asked is, what is the source of these laws and principles? A lot of people say, oh, you know, these are laws of nature, laws of energy, and so on. But there's more to it, because one thing we need to understand from a historical perspective is Newton. Okay, Newton, you remember from our school science. He actually came up with the term laws of nature. And because of the clash between the church and the state, they wanted to divorce God from the laws. So the laws became inert, and because the Christian God, or God according to Christianity, was judgmental, their perception, of course, and there was no scope for reason, but much scope for belief. And if you were a non-believer, you were doomed to hell, and so on. So all of that led them to actually divorce God from the laws of nature. And this is the emergence of modern science, which is very, very recent. Then to add to it, Descartes, who very famously said, I think, therefore I am. He created a dualism between the mind and the body. Earlier it was one being, mind and body. And because their theories became popular at that time, everyone mounts the same without understanding the reason why laws of nature came about, you know, the term. And so we, all of us, or a lot of us also parrot, yes, yes, I believe in laws of nature. Do you believe in God? Do you understand God? No, I believe in higher power, or I believe in a higher energy. So this sounds like a super battery. There's nothing more to it, you know. So we don't want to be a victim of a historical perspective. And given that a lot of us have inherited this legacy of the Vedic vision, it is worth examining what it has to say. And the vision of the Vedas, Vedas, of course, as some of us know, are revealed knowledge by God. I'm referring to God as Bhagavan, to rishis, to evolved masters, and that knowledge has been passed on from generation to generation to generation, and we enjoy the blessings of this knowledge. So the Vedic vision, very simply put, is Sarvam Khalu Idam Brahman. Sarvam, all that is here is Brahman, is the limitless. And we can understand this limitless through its many manifestations. Further, it is said in another Upanishad, Yato va imani bhutani jayante yena jatani jivanti yat prayantyabhisamvishanti ti, which means that from which all beings have come, that from which, or that which sustains all beings, and that into which all beings resolve, is defined as God. Okay. So what does that mean for us? What it means is, when you look around in India, we see many forms of worship. We are not into idol worship. Okay, we have to be very clear about this. No one says idole namaha. Okay, but we invoke the total in a form. And for us, all forms are sacred. So starting with namaste. So I honor you. You are worthy of respect. You are worthy of reverence. I honor you. And that same namaste, I will say it in the Mahalakshmi Stotram. Namaste astu Mahamaye Shri Pithe Surapujite Shankha Chakra Gadahaste Mahalakshmi Namostute. So look at this culture that gives the same level of reverence to Goddess Mahalakshmi, the goddess of all wealth, and to you, whoever you are. Okay? Then, if you've had the blessing of going close to Gangaji, you will see every morning, evening, the locals, they all come to offer their prayers. Then there are people who will go around, do a pradakshina around Ashwatthana tree. And if you are inaugurating your office or a bungalow, whatever it is, we do Bhumi Puja, because Bhumi is sacred. Then, of course, during Navaratri, we do Kanya Puja. Kanya Puja, why? Because you invoke the goddess in this girl, little girl. And of course, those who are into yoga will know about Surya Namaskara if you have studied traditionally. Because traditionally, of course, it's aerobic workout. But through the aerobic workout, you are saying Om Suryaya Namaha, Om Mitraya Namaha, etc. So when you see these forms, they all carry deep meaning. And the meaning that they carry from generation to generation is that all that is here is sacred. Why? Because it is a manifestation of Bhagavan Ishvara. Then what about me? Where am I in this equation? Oh, for that we have one other shloka. Deho Devalaya Proktaha. It is said, Proktaha, that this body is a temple. So a lot of the yoga crowd will say, oh, your body is a temple, and there'll be some music and some fragrance. But what is the source of this? What is the source of yoga? It goes all the way back to the Veda. So we find people are being very selective. I take what I want, like a buffet approach, and I reject the rest. That's not how it works. Because if a tradition has something to offer, then you are willing to go deep into it to see what it offers. Because if asana pranayama can do so much for me, And this tradition offers a lot more than what is that I want to know. And the vision is that you are complete in and of yourself. But how do I understand this? We start with seeing that all that is here is a manifestation of the sacred. Can I arrive at this by logic? No. Logic can support the revelation of the Veda. So, coming back to myself, where am I? Because I find in my life that I am struggling with juggling so many balls. You know, there's work and there's career and there's children and there's picking them up and dropping them. And then, of course, this is alternative thing that I have started. Plus, I am struggling to come to terms with my past. I'm struggling to come to terms with my health, with the status of my wealth, with this ex who has come back into my life. I don't know what to do, etc., etc. So the tradition reminds us that you are sacred. Deho devale proktaha, your body is a temple. Jiva Deva Sanatanaha, the Jiva, the individual, has been Bhagwan, Deva, divine being, since the longest. So therefore what? Just as Nirmalyam are given up, old wilted flowers are given up, are cleared from the temple. Likewise, I worship with the understanding that I am you, Bhagavan. So this is what we call Atma Puja. And a lot of us, I mean, even I used to say that, I don't believe in rituals. But how come we believe in the ritual of the engagement ring? It's a form, but it has deep meaning, right? And suppose maybe the size of the diamond is not big enough, or suppose if your fiance or your partner says, actually, I decided to go for imitation jewelry because it looks nice. So some people will be disappointed. What do you mean imitation? Like, I thought, you're either proposing to me or it's a special occasion. I mean, you can't just go for this. So the ring becomes a symbol of the person's commitment, loyalty, and love, and so on. Just like the flag of the country becomes a symbol of what that country stands for, and there is a very detailed protocol of how the flag should be hoisted and how it should be lowered and so on. Or even the ritual of throwing up the hats during graduation, which is a more recent thing, Now, if you have been, you've got the honors of graduating, why would you throw your hats up in the air? But it's a formalized ritual. Everybody does it. Everybody enjoys it. And if it's not done, like, for a lot of our kids who were abroad and then who had to come back and they couldn't have a proper graduation ceremony, it was very disappointing because they graduated online, okay, which is like, they didn't feel like they actually graduated, So when you really look at it, forms carry deep meaning, and the many forms that we have in India, or rather the Hindus practice, is a pointer to the fact that everything is sacred. And then when we are looking at the different principles and laws, what we really see is that every law, every principle is deeply intelligent. So the fact that I could drop an apple from the 7th floor, and a criminal could also do that, but the law of gravity is not going to be partial. So the apple will fall at the same momentum, whether I throw it or whether someone else throws it. Whatever we put into our bodies in terms of the different cuisines we experiment with, whether it's Chinese or Thai or Japanese or Mediterranean or whatever it is, or Indian. Even in Indian, of course, there are so many varieties. But we are fully aware of the principles of ingestion, digestion, evacuation. They are so predictable. The cells of the body, I don't know which university they went to, but the intelligence that is there in each and every cell about how much to ingest, how much to give away, what are toxins and should be released from the cell, it is all impeccable. Or when we are looking at just the act of breathing, thankfully, it's not voluntary, because we would drop dead, because as we say, I was so busy I didn't even have time to breathe. So if it was a voluntary act, we would have dropped dead. Thankfully, it's not. But look at Vayu, look at air, okay? And for us, all these there are devatas, or rather heads of departments, that oversee this law. When prana goes in, okay, whether you're doing pranayama or just normal breathing, prana, vati iti vayu, that which keeps moving, that is its definition. Vayu, prana, does not decide, okay, I've gone into this marathoner's lungs, it's very nice, it's very roomy, I'm going to stay here. Wah, I found a home now. Or if the air enters the smoker's lungs, will not say, oh my God, this is so suffocating, no, I have to get out. It's impartial. And what we have been taught in modern science, that laws are inert, okay? Things are inert. They seem to be inert, but it's very much like our nails and our hair. Now, a lot of us waited and waited after the lockdown to go and have a haircut. We never said, I need to go for hair surgery. Why? Because hair is inert. And so you can cut it, shape it, style it, do all kinds of things, or go bald also, that's fine. Why do we say we cut the hair? Because obviously it's inert. But what is inert has come from a conscious being. Okay? Just as a plant which is alive, which we feed on, comes from the inert soil. So one can argue, oh, it's the bacteria in the soil and it requires the sunlight and the water and so on. But you stomp on the ground, it's not going to protest. It seems to be inert, but it gives life. What seems to be conscious and what is conscious gives rise to nails which are inert, and obviously hair which is inert. So what we refer to as inert and conscious, which happen to be two categories, there is interplay that goes on all the time. And whether it is inert or whether it is conscious, all the way these laws and principles are deeply intelligent. Then where did the material come from? Because the material for this body came from the 5 great elements. So you will say, no, sperm and ovum, yeah, sure, but what did that get, how was that nourished? It came with the 5 great elements. How can we say that? Because the most biodegradable entity, thing, is the body, right? It's a wonder whether you cremate the body on death or you immerse it in the Ganga like is done for a lot of the monks. So the fishes can feed on it. Or you bury it again like is done for some of the monks or also for Christians and Muslims. So then the body decays, it returns to the elements. Or like in the Parsi community where it is, offered to the vultures and the vultures can feed on it. The 5 great elements by which this body is sustained, the body returns to it. Body is sustained by it, body has as though come from it, and it also returns to it. Perfect biodegradable plant. Thankfully, there is no element of plastic. Otherwise, we would have to wait for billions of years. So, these 5 great elements have come from the limitless, that is Bhagwan, which is a revelation of the Veda. The intelligence of the laws and principles, and then we can also consider the psychological principles. So one doesn't have to study too much psychology to understand people. If in earlier times before Amazon emerged, when people would go shopping for saris, okay, in shops like physical brick and mortar shops, then the salesman is very astute. Suppose a bunch of people have gone, he will look for who's the decision maker. He'll look at what color you're wearing. And then one sari after another, he will display. Some of them will say, oh, this looks very nice on you. Why don't you try it? Put it against, and put it on your shoulder and see how it looks. And you're hesitating, but he will probably put it or he will offer it to you. And then he's figured out who is the decision maker. He's saying, don't you agree that this looks so nice? I don't think you should stop with one. I think you should try another one also. I have another variety. And he goes on. Okay. Now, he has understood certain psychological principles without even studying psychology. Why? Because these laws and principles are available to everyone. There are some people who study it. But in our interactions with each other, we know that all of us have a universal need for approval and appreciation. Everyone has a need for power and achievement. Everyone has some need for fun. Everyone has physical and physiological needs. Everyone has a need to connect. So different things offer us connection, and so the specifics may differ. But this law of cause and effect, even in psychology, the intelligence of that law, the predictability, the consistency of that law, that is indeed intelligence, and intelligence always rests in a conscious being. Intelligence does not rest in anything that is inert. Where there is intelligence, there has to be a conscious being. So then we have no problem in seeing, maybe God, Bhagwan, is the intelligence of all of this. But then by saying that, we localize Bhagwan to Timbuktu or wherever it is. And this is the greatness of the Vedic vision, which helps us see that the material, all the material that is here, which is sustained by very, very intelligent laws, the material is also Bhagavan. But it's not very clear to me. It doesn't matter. We have an example for you. Yatha urnanabhi grinnate srijate cha. Just like a spider. Now, this spider is a brilliant spider. I don't know if any of y'all have any fear of spider, but you will really appreciate spiders. Why? Because the web for the web that the spider spins, the material for the web comes from the spider. The intelligence that I need to make a web in some dark corner or some high corner where the jharu cannot reach easily, I will make it there. Now, which architecture college did this spider go to understand where to make the web or how to make the web? There are scientists that are studying the tensile strength of a web, and they're trying to replicate those properties because the web, the material for the web is going to be very strong. The intelligence of that web and the material for the web both came from the spider. The material, the spider did not go shopping. Okay, I have to do the interiors of my house. So let's say for the tiling, I will go to this vendor, and then maybe for the fittings, I will go to someone else. And then for the cement or whatever, I can go to someone else. Nothing. The spider, one single source for both the intelligence and the material. So when you have an example that goes against the norm, what it really means is the norm is not really the norm. Okay, because we have found an example that goes against it, which means that we can appreciate the possibility that Bhagwan is the source of all the material and all the intelligence that we experience. So then what does this have to do with me? Well, what it has to do with me is that I am a product of the different laws and principles. The laws and principles are sacred. I am sacred. I am worthy. So I don't need to use a L'Oreal product to say I'm worth it. Okay. The Vedic vision tells me I have always been worth it, whatever that it is. The many battles we face as women, or even as, as any person faces, is that we have to come to terms with many aspects of our lives. So whatever is our past or certain events that one has not come to terms with, or the gender we belong to. Now, I don't know of a single woman who has not been groped or who has not been sexually molested. I don't know. Okay, I don't know if you know. And as a result of that experience, a lot of women hold a lot of anger against men. There might be a certain helplessness regarding one's own gender, and then one can swing to another extreme and become super aggressive, and one has to come to terms with the fact that, well, all men are not like that. But some people don't come to terms with that and paint everyone with the same brush. So anyway, what I'm saying is, our spiritual journey involves coming to terms with our past, our gender, whatever that is, and to live out the glory of the gender we belong to, and at the same time not allow the gender to define us. Okay? Then coming to terms with our parents, however they were, what they did not do, and so on. Learning to be at peace with our partner, or the lack of a partner, or the current phase that I'm going through with my partner, my work, finances, or the state of it, my health, my body, my mind. How can I see and how can I come to terms with this? Because it seems like I, and whatever is an ideal that I hold for myself, that I am striving to come to terms with all of these things, because in coming to terms with it, there is shanti, there is peace. And here is where the Vedic vision offers us the law of karma. In having done counseling and therapy for many people, I find modern psychology flawed. Why? It has its place, it does some wonders, but God is missing from the picture. Dharma is missing from the picture. So everything is subjective. It's all about what I want, what you want, what we desire, what our expectations are, what our thoughts are, what our behavior are, and so on. I remember in my early 20s, after I finished my master's and I was practicing, I felt a bit like an imposter because my clients were doing well, but I just felt like I was so quick to manipulate my own thoughts and feelings, and I could get the desired state. So it's very easy. You convert some irrational thoughts into rational thoughts, or that's a cognitive framework, or you integrate certain things, Gestalt framework. So all these frameworks are there, they are helpful, but nothing actually addresses the fact that I am a limited human being and I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with feeling inadequate. I am not okay with feeling incomplete. And the only answer to this is to come to the Vedic vision, which reveals that you are complete in and of yourself, that you are pure being, your consciousness, which is having a human experience. And it's like having this prosthetic body suit with fat and blood and tissues and bones and so on. And one has to live out this human life, but that's not the absolute reality of who you are. So only in understanding the laws of karma and how they pervade me, I was able to come to terms, and also helped a lot of clients to come to terms with so many aspects of their life. Because the why me question bothers everyone. So why am I surrounded by these toxic people? Or why is it that this event happened? So psychology has no answer for it. But karma has an answer for it, and karma comes from the Veda. So this very Veda, of which Vedanta, the last portion of Veda, it's a very tiny section that deals with the pure reality consciousness that you are. It is a systematic study. Why? Because the orientation and the patterns of thinking I am limited, I am inadequate, I am not good enough, and so on, have been on loop for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And so therefore one requires a repeated listening to it and looking at one's life in the light of these teachings. So I am sacred and my life is sacred. My life is pervaded by the intelligence that is Bhagwan, and that intelligence is evident in the way the body functions, in the way the mind functions. Even the emotional order that, for example, I walk into a room and let's say everyone starts laughing. So I think that, maybe they are laughing at me. Okay, it's a conclusion. It may be right, it may be wrong. this emotional order of different emotions in response to different situations, the intelligence of that, the material of that in terms of the hormones and so on, all are pervaded by Bhagwan. So what that really does to me is that the resistance I had for life, the resistance I had to situations, the resistance I had to people, all that starts to dissolve slowly, slowly. Because I see that all laws, all principles in pervading me, I am enough. I am in order, and the pursuit is really to discover the truth of what I really am. So then some people say, oh, but we're very busy. Do you have any technique? Do you have any tools? How does one see this? What does one practice? Well, the busier you are, uh, we have a fantastic disposition for you to practice. And what is that? In the recognition that what I have is given to me, I offered my best in every given situation. So what's new about that? Oh yeah, okay, we offer everybody does their best. Yeah, sure, everyone does their best. But we believe that we call the shots until you realize that you can't even control your own weight. Okay, forget about controlling other people. So now I see that I am a contributor, but not the controller of the results. And in recognition of that, as I offer my actions in terms of whatever I want, I develop Kaushalam and I develop a growing relationship with God. What God is, God has to introduce himself, no one else will do, and God has introduced himself in across the Vedas. So I see that my mind, my intellect, my capacity to analyze, synthesize, all of that given, my body and the way it functions, all of that given, just to lift a hand. So many neural pathways are functioning, all of that given. And what I want to do with my life, the capacity to think through, also given. So all the way I can have certain competence in what I offer, what I can contribute to my own life. And then the different results that come. Okay, so let's say I'm working on a project. In any project, or we look at this Mystic Lotus. So they had a certain plan that so many speakers and so many attendees and so on. Now, there can only be 4 results for this venture. The result is equal to what they expect. So they said, okay, 2,000 members. So at least 1,800 will show up. Okay. So result is equal to what they expect. Or second type of result, only 10 showed up. Okay. So result is much, much less than what they expect, possibility. Third, although 2,000 people signed up, but then another 1,000 came along because the 2,000 people told few others. So then the result became much, much more than what they expected. Or one worldwide luxury brand contacted them and said, you know what, this idea is brilliant. We want to host this on a huge platform. Let's say Vogue said, okay, we will offer it on our platform. So here the result is very different to what they expected. But generally speaking, if we look at all our karma, it will fall into these 4 categories, either equal to what you expect, less than what you expect, more than what you expect or totally different from what you expect. If the result is equal to what I expect or more, I am thrilled, I am beaming, I am at peace. The struggle comes when the result is less than what I expect or totally different, like it's taken me unawares. And for that, we have a very beautiful cultural expression of receiving prasada in a temple. When you go to a temple, you don't know what will be, what you will receive. You could receive holy water, tirtha, you could receive a laddu, you can receive a leaf or something, okay? Or you can even receive sacred ash, but you receive it gracefully because it has come from the altar that is Bhagavan. And there is a lot of cheerfulness there. Where did that come from? It's just an ordinary leaf. What's the big deal about it? No, no, no. It is sacred. It has come from Bhagavan. I accept it readily, fully. And so that's just about the prasada in the temple. But when we are looking at the results of the different laws and principles that govern this universe, multiverse, then Bhagavad Gita suggests that look at every result as prasada. No, but I worked so hard for it, I should have got more results. Yeah, right. But the laws were such that this is what was given to you. Is this positive thinking? No. In seeing that the result was shaped by the laws and principles that are intelligent, the material that is Bhagavan, I no longer oppose life. I fully embrace life. Nothing stands in opposition to me, neither my body, my mind, my partner, my children, because I am living out my karma. And my life then becomes an offering, a celebration of all that is given to me, the great blessings that I have received. And all the way, it's a joy. The more I understand this, then one goes into an inquiry of what this Bhagwan is or what that God is, and the truth or the nature of both me and Bhagwan, which is pure consciousness, which is a subject matter for another day. So with that, I will conclude. And if there are any questions, I can take them. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukh Abhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. So the prayer means, may all beings be happy, may all beings be free from suffering, and may all beings not have any sorrow.
Thank you so much for that, Swamini ji. I think, like me, everyone was just so engrossed in just listening to you. For once, there have been no questions that have popped up in the middle. Like nobody.
I have to silence people into silence.
Well, it would be a happy, in fact, something that you said, I will invite everybody, definitely. Please do ask if you have questions. Feel free to raise your hands. We'll try and get you on to speak to Swamini ji as well. Something you mentioned right at the beginning is that, and what I gathered from it is, why do we hesitate to use the word God, Bhagwan? We're all very happy saying, I believe in the higher power, the higher energy. Why that hesitation? Is it uncool, really, to use?
You're right. You're actually right, because science has made God uncool. Because we rely on perception so much, but you can't see love, but we go by love. Right? We can, that's okay. We're quite selective and we have double standards. But it's got a lot to do with our modern education.
Right. Yes, growing up, I've also done it. I wouldn't use the word. Even till a few years back, I was also on this. I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. I realize now that I am not even like this close to understanding the meaning of either of those words. So, how can I declare myself to be this or that and decide? I'm still figuring it out. I have gotten very comfortable saying Ma or saying Shivji or saying Ganeshji, and now just saying God. And when I say God, for me, it's all of them. I don't need to segregate. I've reached this point somehow stumbling here and there, but I'm nowhere close to figuring this out. And the fact that the right at the end, look at what Swamiji, you said we can't even control our own weight, but we want to control everything else in life. So look at every result as a prasad. That was top eye-opening moment for me. If you see your life being lived out in the way it's meant to be lived out, and take everything in as a prasadam of the intelligence that comes from Bhagwan, there is instantly so much changes. I'm just thinking about it and talking out loud, and somewhere I feel a certain sense of, okay, I feel lighter already, and this is how I've got to see this. So
Wonderful.
thank you so much for that, really. And Shivani is actually written in Swaminiji, how can we help and guide the kids to make them understand and believe in God? Interesting question, Shivani. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. It's important to have an altar at home. You might just light a diya or something like that, but most children learn from observing their parents. So that's point one. Point two is, I would suggest you subscribe to our channel. We have one, Spiritual Heritage of India for Next Gen Empowerment. Okay, Shine. I mean, I can put the link somewhere, maybe on Telegram. So we've done a video on who is God, and we talk about the 6 qualities of Bhagavan. Bhaga standing for 6 virtues. So videos like that, and the third thing is helping them understand dharma. Dharma as in living a life of values, and dharma being sustained by God will be wonderful. Okay, we don't want children to really believe in God, but we want them to see that what they have is given, and we want them to be very effective as people. We want them to be connected to the rest of the elements and so on. And we have a video about this in terms of how to establish a spiritual foundation for children, where we emphasize these points. So I would suggest you have a look at that. And then if there are follow-up questions or specifics, I'm happy to answer them. Yeah. Okay.
Fantastic. And we will share that link, Swamiji, here on the chat, on the group. As soon as we get it, we'll make sure it goes out in the call replay email as well. In fact, somebody's just written in asking, can we receive Vedanta knowledge in online classes, especially for kids?
Yeah. Vedanta is actually not for children. Okay. Why? Because Vedanta is addressed to the seeker who has been there, done that, and now wants moksha. Okay. Generally in spirituality, we are looking for a technique to improve the kind of pleasure we have, or improve our money status and so on. Whereas moksha is, having been there, done that, I want to know who I am. Okay. So Vedanta is more for an adult. But in terms of spiritual heritage of India and so on, one of my students, she conducts classes, and her name is Sonali. So she does some online classes also, generally for the age group of 10 plus. So again, I can put you all in touch with her. My website is discoveratma.com. So, one can um, access courses over there, but that's mainly for adults, but there is some little thing for children as well. Yeah.
And in fact, thank you for explaining that, Swaminiji, because like you said, children watch their parents. So while growing up, I wouldn't like these things to be imposed on me because nobody was explaining anything. It's like elders have been doing, I am doing, now you have to do. And that's just not, excuse me, what do you do? What are you saying?
Exactly, and
Yeah.
that's the reason, like, a lot of us rebelled. And I've been through my phase of being an atheist and an agnostic, like I'm sure everyone has.
Right.
Yeah, so we make sure that everything is understood, and we engage in dialogue and debate. Children or even adults don't have to believe in anything.
Right. Absolutely. And I, in fact, do follow that at home as well. I don't force anything on them, but I do try my best to let them at least see or catch a glimpse of what I'm doing and why I'm doing. And fingers crossed, they'll find their own way eventually. So, yeah. And Bhagyama has written in saying, incredible. It was such a joy listening to you. I could listen to you all day long. And Bhagyama, I completely agree with you. When you started with the chants, with the chanting also in the beginning, there was a soothing, ek halkapan laga, there was a soothingness to it, and you have such an amazing voice, and to have you invoke those energies at the beginning and then even at the close of it, absolutely delightful. So I am like I said,
Nidu had reminded me that
yes.
my book has recently been out. It's called You Matter,
Right.
Insights from Vedanta. So Vedanta might seem like a difficult subject matter, but I very lovingly curated certain articles from my podcast, and it's a very easy to read book. But you can start anywhere in the book. It's available on Amazon, and I believe the link is out. But you will gain a lot from the tradition that you belong to. It's our way to honor, and because the tradition lives in us, because we live the tradition, and the tradition is one of fullness. And it's Swarajya is our birthright. Freedom is my birthright, and I shall have it, as our freedom fighter said, Lokmanya Tilak. But that's our true nature, and you will get a lot of glimpses of that in the book. So I hope you might consider picking it up. You Matter, Insights from Vedanta.
And we will be sharing the link as well, and it's already been put up. In fact, a question has come in from Nidu asking, do tell us a little bit more about karma and dharma.
Okay. So any action that we do is subject to the law of dharma. Dharma includes all values, all principles, and includes the principle of cause and effect. So I perform a kind action for you, let's say. There are two results. One is you are happy, perhaps. So that's a visible result. And there is an invisible result called punya, what we might refer to as brownie points that get credited to your account. So the law of karma says that, of course, every action has a result. It's both visible and invisible. The punya we experience in our life is in the form of sukha or comfortable, happy situations. So having a supportive partner, having more than enough money in the bank, having a lot of opportunities, having a good education, wonderful parents, all that is a form of our punya, which has been transformed into sukha. So that's how I live a happy life and so on. This understanding comes to us from the Veda. Okay, there's no way logic will tell us this. And so, what really makes us happy is dharma. You look at anyone you admire them for a quality they embody. And that quality, that value, that principle is dharma, because dharma is this huge umbrella of honesty, justice, compassion, kindness, pleasure, fun, independence, power, achievement, all of it. And so when we embody a particular value or we see someone embodying that and we admire them, really speaking, we are admiring dharma, because dharma makes us happy. And so when we look at dharma as a framework for living, it's no more about what I want or what you want. What is helpful to ask is, what does this situation demand of me? And I believe as women, we are brilliant at figuring this out. You know, it's a lot of people say, hey, we are selfless and so on. It comes from our understanding of dharma. And the good news is dharma is in everyone's heart. We instinctively know what is the right thing to do to further the situation for both me and the other person. You know, I'm not talking about dharma. Dharma is not morals, okay? Dharma are values. And dharma is also dynamic. It's not absolute. The same tradition that talks about respect for elders, which we see in, Bhagwan Rama abiding with his father's vow, that same tradition also praises Prahlada, who went against his father, because father said, hey, you have to chant my name. And he said, no, 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 I worship Vishnu. And actually, because of that, the father met a terrible end, although he was very powerful. So, two instances, one where respect to the father is shown at its height, and another where respect for dharma is shown. And in that respect for dharma, or what is the right thing to do, the boy went against the father. So, like that, in our Puranas and so on, we always have these two different types of instances that are presented to us to just show us that dharma is not absolute, it's dynamic. And our understanding of dharma keeps growing as we face different kinds of situations and not escape like Arjuna wanted to escape in the battlefield.
Right. Lovely. And Bhagyama is written in, so can I ask you a question, please? Something I am often asked: how come those who live by dharma suffer while those who are greedy and selfish seem to get away with everything?
Yeah, this is a very common question. It's a good question. It can only be explained by law of karma. That person's punya fructified and it seemed like they are getting away, but from the standpoint of law of karma and law of justice, the person will pay the price for sure, either this lifetime or the next lifetime. There is no escape. One can escape the criminal justice system, like a lot of people do, as we know, but you cannot escape the law of karma. And so one has to pay the price. There's no question about it. Yeah. But it's true that when you see these instances, you say, well, you know, isko to koi fayda nahi hua, to I can also, it's okay, I don't need to abide by dharma. We look for shortcuts or excuses, you know. But again, even the thief in the gang will say, you know, tell me the truth, okay? How much did you get? So it's ironical, no? And everyone wants dharma, everyone veers towards it, but then we have double standards. Yeah.
Amazing. In fact, Swamiji, you know, you've mentioned your book, and we know it's available on Amazon. You did say a little bit about it, that you curated podcast. Tell us a little bit more of exactly of, you know, what's in there, what's in the book.
Okay. So there are different articles, and I probably read the blurb. Okay. So you feel that I'm not good enough despite your achievements. Vedanta reveals that you are Purna, complete in and of yourself. You see the need to have a spiritual experience. Vedanta shines the light on you, the experiencer, through all your experiences. Your life feels like a burden. Vedanta shares that you are deeply blessed. So, which one is true? What you believe or what Vedanta reveals about you? And so there are different articles, and I'll tell you the names of some of them. The three blessings we have every moment, the shadows of self-judgment, the dance of karma, the role of a guru, the relevance of Hinduism for the spiritual but not religious, and so on. And of course, I start with how Jesus saved me and led me to Vedanta.
Amazing. I actually I just placed my order
Wow.
for the
quick.
book. Yeah, I sit with my credit card next to me. It's something I learned from Amrish. So I know I'm definitely looking forward to reading this book, and I'm just checking in if any other questions
This is
have
one,
come
yeah.
in.
Yeah, I can read that.
And there it is.
Yeah. Yeah, the book is in English, yes.
Right.
Yeah,
And
and abroad, it's like my overseas students, they are accessing the Kindle version. The paperback is only available in India, but the Kindle is across Amazon. Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned about growing Kaushalam when we accept that we cannot control things and can only put in our best effort. Does Kaushalam here mean skill? It is skill in interpreting dharma and acting according to dharma. Yes. If so, then how do we remain watchful for growing ego in proportion to growing skill and recognition? You know, the ego or the ahankara is our self-concept. And the ego actually doesn't have a reality of its own. It's really the Atma, okay, the limitless, that's as though masquerading as the ego limited individual. And so to feel significant and important, it identifies with different things. But the more you understand how Ishvara pervades you, you see every moment is a blessing. You know, the air goes in and it goes out, thankfully, and you're still alive, you know, and all the processes are happening. Every moment is a blessing. People are blessings in your life. They have come to teach you certain things. The more and more you see that, there is no scope for the ego to grow to astronomical proportions, because you see all that is here is given. And that ego actually understands what the meaning of surrender is. Because surrender is very beautiful. When you love, you surrender. When you're happy, you surrender to the moment. And here you are in harmony with this creation that is pervaded by Ishvara. So you keep doing what you need to do and you receive things as prasada. You in fact become extremely competent, because now you're not resisting a lot. You're investing a lot of your time, effort, and energy in doing what needs to be done. And every response you make, you grow. Because in your response, you become bigger than the situation. In your response, you become bigger than the emotion that stopped you. In your response, you become bigger than the limitation that someone imposed on you and said, hey, you can't do anything because you're a woman, or whatever it is. Okay. So, you know, none of that. You just do what you need to do according to dharma. So that's Kaushalam. Yeah. Otherwise, some of the street kids I worked with, they had tremendous Kaushalam in pickpocketing and you know, stealing mobile phones. But that's not what we're talking about in terms of skill and action. No. Yeah.
very nicely, as always, so beautifully explained, Shantini. I hope you got your response right there. And might I add, Swamiji, somebody's already ordered the Kindle version as well. And in fact, what everybody here doesn't know is, you know, we've all been listening to you, and it's been so delightful, as Bhagyama also mentioned, and that we could go on and on. People, if you'd like to have a one-on-one chat with Swamini ji for 30 minutes, all you have to do is make a donation of 550 rupees. And we're going to share that link with you as well right now. If you want to have a separate one-on-one conversation with the absolutely fabulous Swamini ji here. 30 minutes, just 550 rupees. That's your donation for her time. So basically.
Also, one more thing to add. It's already
Yes.
on my website, but I run online classes during the week. So, we do different texts, and I have students from different parts of the world. So we go through a systematic study of Vedanta. So people are welcome to get in touch if they want to pursue Vedanta. Then I look forward to connecting with them as well.
That is fabulous. Thank you so much. And Nidhu's put in a reminder that even that this 30-minute conversation with you also gets them into the Mystic Lotus awesome money tele summit that's coming up in October. So that's there as well. So before we head towards winding up, Swamiji, first of all, thank you so much for taking time out to be here with us. I know that it's not possible to have this conversation in like an hour, but in that hour, you gave us so much to look at, to think about, to go back, listen to the replay, reassess. I loved the spider bit. In fact, somebody, while you were saying it, somebody wrote in saying that I just saw a spider in the bathroom, and it's not the typical kind of spider that we usually see.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's no relevance to it, but in my altar, there's this one tiny spider who keeps visiting every now and then, pops in, pops out. So I don't know if it has any connection to what I've just heard today, but I'd like to.
You
Sorry?
made the connection. You made the connection. The spider is a reminder of Bhagwan.
So, and keeps popping up there. So I'm going to keep looking out for where you come. So before we actually finally wind up for right now, is there anything that you'd like to leave us with, Swamiji?
The goal of human life is to be happy, and it's possible if you discover that happiness is your nature, that fullness, purnatvam, is your nature. If we don't discover that, we will go from one lifetime to another. And this human life is a blessing, manusyatvam. So we make the most of the blessing we have.
Thank you. And may I request you to leave us, when you finished your conversation, you had put in a prayer chant out for everyone. May I please request that you put something out there again for all of us, and that's the note that we'd like to close this conversation and this first edition of the Women's Telesummit.
So I'll do another chant then. Yeah.
Please.
Here I'm invoking all the elements and invoking all the deities to bless everyone. Okay. Om Shanno Mitrasham Varunaha Shanno Bhavat Varyama Shanna Indro Brahaspatihi Shanno Vishnurukramaha Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayo Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishyami Ritam Vadishyami Satyam Vadishyami Tanmamavatu Tadbhaktaramavatu Avatu Mam Avatu Bhaktaram Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you.
It's called the Shanti Mantra, one of the 10 Shanti mantras.
And is this also something that you teach in your Vedanta classes?
I've actually taught a couple of students who now teach chanting.
Fabulous. Somebody was asking, and now they have the answer as well. And I'm just checking in with the team if they'd like to come in. Nidhu, if you're here, if you're coming on. And sorry, maybe she's okay. And yes, we head towards closing with that beautiful chant. Thank you so much, Swamini ji. Thank you, and wishing all of our fabulous listeners a huge thank you. You have a great week ahead, and we're going to see you very soon. And once again, Swamini ji, thank you so much.
Thank
for
you.